Welcome to the show, my fellow book lovers. I'm going to read you the inside of this flap really quickly. For eons, humanity's greatest minds, philosophers, theologians, and scientists have lacked confirmable answers to the questions that define and explain the meaning of human existence, what we are, and what created us. In Genesis, Edward O. Wilson, examining evolutionary history further back than he has ever done before, delivers a revelatory account of the deep origins of society. Asserting that religious creeds and philosophical questions can be reduced to purely genetic and evolutionary components, and that the human body and mind have a physical base obedient to the laws of physics and chemistry, Wilson argues that the only way for us to fully understand human behavior is to appreciate the long, complicated evolutionary histories of non-human species. Which brings us to our next book, The Top 10 Things I Learned from Genesis, The Deep Origin of Societies. Number 1, there are 17 species that form superorganisms based on eusociality. We're discovering more all the time, but there's quite a wide array of different species that form superorganisms. There's the ants, there's termites, there's naked mole rats, there are shrimp. They're discovering more all the time, but this is the key to understanding humans, because civilizations are built the same way, and we can't learn that from studying primates like chimps and bonobos and orangutans and baboons and whatnot. The second thing I learned, eusocial species can be defined as those that practice altruism and cooperation. Eusociality also has a more technical definition that involves division of labor, specialization, and 3 generations of essentially wisdom that can be passed on. So we're talking like, children, adults, and grandparents, that type of 3 levels of generations. There's a lot of species that fit some of these, but only the ones that are superorganisms fit all of them. That brings us to point number 3. Eusociality is rare. You actually don't see it very often. In the insect world, I think you only see it in 2% of the species, but they happen to be the most successful species by far, like ants and termites, wasps and bees. I don't think they're a close second, though. I think ants are really running the show. Like, basically, if aliens came to this planet and their criteria for determining the most successful species was just sheer numbers, they'd be talking to ants. So they would kind of ignore us, if that was the criteria, obviously. But eusociality is kind of a paradox. It's an evolutionary oxymoron. It's a Darwinian paradox of we're going to beat the competition through cooperation, and we're all going to work as a unit, kind of like all the cells in your body work together as a unit, as opposed to all of your cells in your body acting like bacteria and being individual. Number 4, termites were the first eusocial species, originally emerging 200 million years ago. That date is relative. I don't really know, based on my studies into geology and archaeology. I'm a catastrophist, so the strata can form a lot quicker than the uniformitarian mode, and these datings through like radiocarbon dating and all that, like that's all more of an art form than a science. You can kind of pick the numbers that you need it to get to. So I don't know if 200 million years ago is accurate, but it's a long time ago. Termites were the first. That brings us to point number 5. Selfishness is like a cancer to a superorganism based upon altruism and cooperation. So I used the analogy before of all the cells in your body working like a unit. If one of those cells decides, hey, I'm going to do my own thing, I don't want to do this other thing, and it just starts being selfish, well, that's a cancer cell. It's going to, start using up all the resources and dividing uncontrollably, and with even though that is the rule of nature with all non-superorganisms, selfishness is the way to go. But we get ahead by acting as a unit, and also our tool use isn't unique to humans, but making tools to make other tools is, and those are the two things to our keys to our success. Number 6, humans are a eusocial species, and some people might debate that, and that is probably the result of Darwinian philosophy being applied beyond its scope of evolution. But we do put this emphasis on competition on pretty much everything, and so some people might say, no, we're based on competition. Well, that's kind of what we're doing with our surplus resources, is divvying it up by competition. But at the core, there's a lot more cooperation going on than there is competition going on, and you see that. You kind of have to look for it. Like it isn't really taught to you, but when you look for it, you'll see it more than you see the competition. The 7th thing that I learned, Rhopalidia wasps, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but we're going to go with it. Rhopalidia wasps achieve evolutionary success through a benevolent autocracy headed by a queen. Now, we usually can look at history and find a lot of bad dictators, bad men that ruled poorly and like tyrants. But the superorganisms avoid that. They have a benevolent autocracy, and that kind of makes sense, because in a superorganism, some people are the body, like they're the feet, they're the stomach, they're the hand, but other people are the head. So it makes sense that you want to have a head running the superorganism. If you didn't, you wouldn't have a very successful superorganism. The 8th thing that I learned, peacemaker pheromones assist in the nonviolent succession of Rhopalidia wasps. Now, these wasps, scent is a major, one of their primary senses, whereas with us, it's probably our least utilized sense. With wasps, it's arguably the top, their primary sense, and they give off pheromones that are soothing and calming and bring peace when there's a succession among the queens. So that way there's no violence, and they do things without revolutions. It's a nice and orderly and peaceful affair. So good job, Rhopalidia wasps. That's pretty awesome. The 9th thing that I learned, new Rhopalidia queens are the oldest. Now, when scientists were looking at this, they theorized that the next queen was going to be the most closely genetically related to the previous queen. It turns out that's not the case. It's just simply the oldest, and that makes sense because these are the heads of the superorganism, and with age comes wisdom. Generally speaking, you get smarter as you get older, and so it's really cut and dry. The oldest queen is the next queen, and that is one of the keys to their success. And that brings us to the 10th thing that I learned reading Genesis, The Deep Origin of Societies. That is, ancient religion must have been the catalyst for humans becoming a eusocial species based upon altruism and cooperation. Religion teaches us to work as a unit. It teaches us not to steal from each other. It teaches us not to murder. It teaches us not to bear false witness. And that's not just, the Judeo-Christian tradition. All religions throughout history have had some form of the golden rule: do unto others as you want them to do unto you. But they're teaching you how to behave as a unit. And also, the ancient religions wouldn't have had competition, so you wouldn't have had infighting among various religions like you have at some points in history. It's a little blown out of proportion, but anyways, that's neither here nor there. So those are the 10 things I learned reading Genesis: The Deep Origin of Societies. This book was written by Edward O. Wilson. He is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He is known for studying ants, and he has written some other books, some of which that I have, and they're all fascinating. It's really interesting to learn how much you can. You're learning about humans when you're studying ants, because they build cities. Like chimps aren't building cities, bonobos aren't building cities, but ants are. Ants are building these sprawling cities. They have agriculture going on in there. They're farming a fungus. They're corralling aphids and drinking their milk. It's all super fascinating. I highly recommend checking out the book. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll talk further down there. Thank you again for listening.